So Innovation Birmingham, I think one of the UK's, if not the UK's largest campus for digital businesses currently, fantastic asset for the region. We're going to be a little bit challenging tonight and do things a little bit differently. You're going to hear from a variety of speakers. Like I say, many of them, or some of them sort of have flown in to kind of talk to you tonight. So I'll get off in a minute. Then we've got Patrick. I'll come back and talk a little bit about technology. Matthias over from Switzerland. We've got a video from Ben. I think it's from Georgia. He does a lot of work with the third sector. Then Susan's over from California, and Peter will finish up and kind of summarize what we're doing. So I'm going to kind of speed through that and now welcome Patrick onto the stage, onto the floor. Patrick's got an interesting background, which he may or may not tell you about. He's got about 10 minutes. He's going to, I think, I'm never quite sure with Patrick, but I think he's going to take you into the future of leadership just for 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and talk about what's happening today in the world of technology. Right, Patrick?
Thank you, sir. Okay. So, hey there, everybody. I'm glad to be here. And I flew in from Zurich this morning with my very good friend Matthias. We had a short night, good dinner, lots of drink. Last night, I live in Berlin. I'm German. I do apologize for my strong German accent. So you'll notice there's a little bit of American in there. And originally it's Irish. So that's kind of closer to you guys than Berlin is or America is. And when we think a little bit about the future, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. What can the future bring? But when we look at it from the perspective of this idea around digital overload, about how busy we've become every single day in the things that we do, and how this busyness sometimes distracts us from some of the most important and relevant things around us. And when we look into the future of how organizations are going to be, this is a place where young organizations can learn how to be successful, how they can learn the different steps and the different pieces needed to go someplace you've never gone before. And for us from Future Work, we actually get to sit down together like we did today and think about what the future is going to bring. And I'm an optimistic person. So I look at the future, it's bright, it's positive, it's beautiful. And I think this way because I'm fortunate enough that I'll also have, I've got 3 kids, but I've got an 18-month young boy now. And he brightens up our lives. His sister is 15, his closest sister is 15 years old. There's a big gap. But this little kid is impacting us already. And it's kind of funny what he started doing with 6 months with the iPhone already, figuring it all out. And we had 4 different phones from 4 different manufacturers, and he was figuring out how to do stuff on the phone that my wife didn't know how to do yet. And he's just a little kid, you know? And then he goes up to the TV, and he's trying to pinch and swap on the big screen that don't work. He's trying to figure life out. So something's going on, and it's doing a lot of crazy stuff. And in our businesses and in our organizations, we're trying to be more efficient and more productive than ever before. And we get a lot of pressure to do more with less, and this turns into stress. And what do? We pull out our phones, or I got this super iWatch thingy. I love this thing. I'm thinking I don't even have to look at the phone because it beeps at me and tells me to breathe. I'm like, wow, isn't it cool that I got a machine telling me to breathe? I said, good that I can know how to breathe without thinking about it. Because if I didn't breathe, I'd be dead. So good. Thank you, Apple, reminding me to breathe. So now, we thought about this a lot. Are we going to do this other thing? I said, if we're going to talk about future work, what if I was able to go 20 years into the future and bring back something that everyone is going to do in 20 years from now, before they start a meeting, before they start a conference like this? In 20 years, our kids will do this every single day. If I could find what that is and bring it back, and it only takes 3 minutes, should I share it with the audience or not? We were thinking about it. We said, but it's different. It could be innovative. It could be disruptive. This is England. I don't know. You're English people. I don't know. Do you jump on that? Well, hey, you went over and colonized us. that was innovative. That was disruptive. You know, it was bold, audacious, explorers, whatever you want to call it. So I think you guys can handle it, okay? It's only 3 minutes, but it's 3 minutes from 20 years from now. And it's like an experiment, right? Imagine if, after we're done the 3 minutes, what if you started every day like this? What if you started every meeting like this? What if the quality you can achieve in this 3 minutes goes beyond anything that Apple or IBM or Google or Amazon could ever invent? In 3 minutes. That's going to be the attempt I have to do with you guys, okay? So, I'll explain the exercise in German. No, it's just a test. See if anybody goes, is he really going to do that? No, I'm not going to do that. So here's what we're going to do. This is how people will work together in 20 years. And working together means a team. You know, so the smallest team you can have is a team of 2 to collaborate, cooperate, work together, right? Unless you've got multiple split personality disorder, you can be a team with yourself. You know, I've met a lot of top executives at big companies. They have that. They have that. They really like sitting in a room all by themselves and having a conversation. Really strange. But anyway, so 2, which means I'm going to ask you to kind of look to your left and right, and you're going to find a partner. Like right there, you just caught each other. So you want to try this out too? Are you excited about the future? You want to give it a test? Hey, man, you got skinny jeans on. You can do this. Come on. Okay, so you got Susan here. She's going to be your partner. You find a partner. Matthias is going to be standing by for me. No, you go this way. This is your partner here. So you got a partner in this row? Everybody got a partner? You got a, yeah, here too. You got to find a partner. Wait a minute. You got a partner here. This guy. You want to come to the lady?
Can we have 3 or
2. We're going to do 2 because it takes 3 minutes. We take 3. It takes 9 minutes. It takes a little longer. Okay, you're a team there. Okay, you teaming? The two of you. Anybody not have a partner? Anybody not have a partner? Yeah. You guys are good? You guys are amazing. And remember, do this with your girlfriend. You don't have a partner. Okay, Matthias, you have a partner. You get the Swiss guy. Okay, we got it. Here we go. So 30 years from now, this is what's going to happen. Okay? You're going to turn to your partner. So you're going to face each other. So this is going to be like an attention exercise, because in 20 years from now, people really pay attention to each other even more than they do to their devices or smartphones. This is really, so you're going to have to look at your partner like you would look at your Facebook account or Twitter account, okay? So you got to really get excited, like, where's the like? Where's the like button? Where's the like button, right? Okay, so you got to look at each other, right? And this is going to be a 60-second, 30-second thing, right? So this is what happens. There's going to be a question given to you guys, and you only have to decide, because I'm not going to tell you the question to the very end, okay? You have to decide of the 2 of you who answers the question first. So look at each other without speaking and non-verbally agree who's going to go first. You got to do that. So look at each other. There it went. I like that. That was a quick one. Point the finger always works, right? So now you know. There you go. Now you know. I like the non-speaking part. That works real good here. So here we go. Now, what's going to happen is the person that just got picked, you get 60 seconds to answer this question. You get the full 60 seconds of attention, no interruptions, no questions, no comments, just full 60 seconds of attentive energy to you answering this question from your partner. They're going to pay attention to you for 60 seconds. And if you don't know what to say, you still get 60 seconds of silent attention, okay? So you get the 60 seconds no matter what. It's an easy question, though. You should be able to answer, okay? But if you don't have any words, just be quiet. You're going to get attention anyway, right? 60 seconds of attention. After that, after you've spoken for 60 seconds, your partner's going to give you 30 seconds of feedback. This is a very simple thing because we do this all the time. But this feedback is going to be positive, appreciative, and thankful feedback, not dramatic, constructive, critical. You know, we teach that in our companies. No critical. Positive, appreciative, thankful feedback. So you got to pay attention in the 60 seconds because you got to find that golden nugget to give 30 seconds of feedback on. You got to find something good, something really good that you loved about what just happened. what they said, how they said it. You got to love it. Worst case, if they did nothing good for 60 seconds, look down at the shoes and say, great shoes. Shoes are great, okay? So if someone tells you that you got great shoes, next time you get in this exercise, you get 60 seconds, think about it. You got to do a better answer, right? Okay? Very simple. After you're done, it switches over and your partner gets the same 60 seconds, answers exactly the same question, so it's kind of fair, and then you get 30 seconds of positive, appreciative feedback, and then you're done. That's 90 seconds plus 90 seconds, 3 minutes. I got to explain it the first time, but in 20 years, everybody knows how to do this, because every time they encounter each other for the first time, they always do this anyway. It's the natural part of the future work of the future, okay? So, are you ready? You still need a question, right? So here it comes. And listen, I'm going to be your timekeeper. Because see, in the future, no one looks at clocks or watches anymore, because everybody's got time. Nobody's in a hurry. They feel good. They're relaxed. They're happy. And this little exercise helps that happen. Okay? You ready? Here it comes. So 60 seconds. I'll be your timekeeper. Your time. And the question is, of course, who am I and why am I here? You have to ask yourself that question. Who am I? Why am I here? 60 seconds. Your time begins now. Okay, thank you. Just finish your thought. You don't have to stop in the middle, but finish your thought that you just had. And when you're finished, I'll wait. Thank you. Finish your thought. And when you're done, there we go. Now, 30 seconds, positive, appreciative feedback begins now. About 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. Finish that thought. That's a goodness coming from you. Finish the thought. And when you're done, I'll wait. I'll wait till the positive feedback is finished. Get that thought out, whatever it was. I like the laughs. That's good. So when you're done, thank you. We'll now switch over. I'm going to wait. I'll wait till you're done. Thank you. Okay. Then we'll switch it over. Now your partner gets the same 60 seconds that you just had. Who am I? Why am I here? Your partner begins. Time goes now. 60 seconds. Okay, thank you. Finish that thought. Go ahead and finish the thought. We'll wait. Don't need to cut it off. Thank you. And when you're done, I'll wait. And now we'll switch over. 30 seconds, positive, appreciative feedback from your partner begins now. Okay, thank you very much. Finish your thought. Finish your thought. Thank you. We'll wait. Thank you. And finish the thought. Thanks a lot. And at the end, please briefly be thankful to your partner for their attention and their appreciation. Just be thankful. Say thank you to each other. You know, you don't have to kiss or nothing like that. Okay. Now, I believe, how does that, can you feel the change of energy in the room? If you can, raise one hand. You change the energy in the room, just that 3 minutes. If you think you have the best partner in the world, raise both hands. Anybody don't have their hands up? You got to think about that one, right? Where did your partner go, right? So now that was just, 3 minutes without a smartphone, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or anything else, okay? And it's just this element of who we are and why we're here becomes an intrinsic center point of how we work together as human beings. And that's what will happen in 20 years from now. Maybe it'll happen tomorrow morning at your office. Try it out. Have fun. I'm glad that you're connected now. I get to hand it over and continue doing what you do. And every once in a while, pay attention to each other. It's worth it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Patrick. Actually, this makes my life easy because I have 2 questions to answer now. Who am I and what am I doing here? I'm Peter Thompson, and I'm one of those crazy partners as part of this Future Work Forum. And it's my job mainly today, what I'm doing here, is to introduce the authors from the book, keep the process going through the time we have here, and make sure you get to your drinks and canapes in good time at the end. Instead of taking you forwards 20 years, maybe what I should do is kind of take you back 2 years to an event which was happening in the Future Work Forum in one of our meetings, where one of our many Swiss partners was asked by one of their clients, what are we doing, what should we be doing about all this stress we're having in our organization? We've got now all this technology and it is causing us problems. And Peter Vogel sent an email around and then raised it at one of our meetings and said, actually, this looks like a common problem. Is it something we all are seeing or being asked about? And we realized that more and more this was happening. All sorts of different companies, employers, from public, private sector, were all saying the same thing. Our employees are getting more and more stressed. What's happening? And we looked around the room and said, actually, what is happening? This technology was supposed to bring us a life of leisure, wasn't it? I mean, by now, we should all be at least working only 3 days a week. We should really be having going to the beach on the 4th and 5th days of the week, enjoying 3-4 day weekends, etc. Instead, what are we doing? We might be able to get away for a short weekend, but we're taking the smartphone with us, we're taking the tablet on holiday, we're taking the laptop to bed, etc. One of the interesting facts we came across in researching the book one of the surveys we quote from the USA was 71% of the respondents take their smartphone to bed, and it's the first thing they look at in the morning. Now, depending on how attractive their partner is, maybe you can understand that's the first thing they look at in the morning, but it is happening. Okay, now this is honesty time. You've been honest with each other as part of the introduction. Honesty time, hands up now, all those people who take a smartphone, tablet, or other device to bed with them. They don't have to have it in the bed necessarily, but they have it beside the bed. Turns out 3 or 4% hold it actually to their chest overnight. It's so valuable, right? And this is becoming serious. People are getting addicted to the technology, and there's now internet addiction syndrome. There's a lovely word we quote in the book, nomophobia, which is the fear of losing your mobile phone. And it is now like a drug that people are addicted to. Now, we thought, where's the problem? And we thought, organizations are creating this problem. If you said to the leaders of an organization, right, we found a drug, a Class A drug, that would make your employees work a bit harder, they'd kind of be a bit more enthusiastic, but it probably would stress them out, probably cause them problems at home, probably shorten their life, probably be bad for their health. Would you give it to them? Or tell you what, don't tell them though, would you sneak it in the coffee machine, right? This drug. How many responsible leaders would say yes? None of them, I hope. But what are we doing? That's exactly what we're doing with the technology. So we were faced with this problem of why is this happening? And we looked at it from all different angles. We have 16 different contributors to the book, right? We know we've got some here this evening from Switzerland. We've got one from the USA this evening. They've come from all different parts of the globe. And we had to pull this together. It was a bit like herding cats at one stage. So we pulled this together into what we believe is a pretty unique collection of views on this subject. The book points the finger very clearly at leaders, and we'll hear more from the speakers about leadership as one of the key causes of the problem. The book is kind of fitted into 3 real sections. We're talking about the causes, the problem itself, the causes, and then finally the solutions. So I'm not going to talk solutions, but I'm going to hand over to the other contributors who will talk about the solutions. I will attempt to summarize that at the end, and then we'll have a panel so you get your opportunity to fire questions at the speakers. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is Matthias Mullany. It's not? Oh, it's Cliff. I beg your pardon. See, already I'm one ahead. Having said that the speakers come from all around the globe, we have one very local speaker all the way from Birmingham, Cliff Dennett.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Most of you know I'm from just that office out the back there, so not very far at all. Many of you know, I am not a technophobe by any means. I've reached 50, and when I was helping write this book, I was thinking, have I just got too old and it's all run away from me? When you ask millennials, though, you hear very similar things as well, so I don't think it is very much a sort of age issue. My day job is to encourage the formation, growth, and relocation to Birmingham of technology businesses. And my whole life's been working in technology with large IT companies. I grew up, my mum and dad owned a TV repair shop back when we used to fix technology rather than throw it away, and we had the first gadgets, the first video games, the first home computers. So I've grown up with it. So I just wanted to put that out there and park it, because probably what I'm going to say next sounds like a technophobe perspective, but I think as any thought leadership exercise, you've got to think critically and look at the other perspective, which is what we've kind of done in this book. So to get us into this, imagine you're walking into a meeting, one of your normal meetings at work, and you walk in, and there's half a dozen of your colleagues around a table. You're about to kick off and talk about some really important subject. And the difference is, though, today you've walked in with a complete stranger, and nobody knows them. The stranger doesn't know anything about your business, and oddly, nobody questions it. And you sit down with this stranger next to you, and you start your meeting. Then every 5 minutes or so, this stranger randomly pipes up and says something completely irrelevant to the meeting. Or he pops a picture out of his pocket and shows it to you. Yeah? It completely distracts the meeting. And everybody tries to ignore them, oddly. They try to ignore them, but they can't, because there's this guy, this idiot, just making comments there all the time. And you can't ignore him. And after a while, even if he doesn't say anything, you look at him waiting for him to say something stupid. So you still can't ignore him. Now, you'd probably be fired if you did that. Or even if you weren't fired, you probably wouldn't be invited to many more meetings, which is, every cloud has a silver lining. Now, of course, you know what I'm going to say, holding up a smartphone. We do this every day. Millions of times around the world, in thousands of meetings, people are bringing their phones in and putting them on meeting tables and waiting for them to buzz and ring and be interruptive. Thank you. Thank you, best partner in the room. Waiting for them to interrupt. It's crazy, really, isn't it? And even when something, we put them on silent, yeah, so they don't interrupt us, why bring them in the first place? We put them on silent, we leave them on the desk, you hear the vibration, don't you? And then 6 people glance down at their devices, distracted from this very important meeting, glance down at their devices, and you've checked out. Glance down at your device. And if it's yours, if it's not yours, you think, oh, I wonder who's talking to who over there. I wonder what's going on there. And if it is yours, you'll say, well, I won't be rude. And you'll surreptitiously kind of flick it open during the conversation, have a little look. And you're checked out. And we do this all the time. Now, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take a person into a meeting and do that, but we do it all the time. A few large tech companies, I'm a fan of technology, I'll repeat, a few large tech companies have worked out how to remotely trigger, using a software algorithm, a dopamine release in our brains, which means we cannot help but look at these things. Very, very cleverly defined interfaces, very cleverly defined interruptions and notifications, and the way that the social media itself is designed. They've worked out how to do that. Now, I worked at Orange. I was fortunate enough to work for Orange in corporate strategy in the late 90s. And back in those days, in the early days of the mobile phone industry, would you believe, the analysts predicted that the maximum size for mobile phones, the market size, would be 15% of business people. Male. 15% of male business people. I remember a senior director from one of the large incumbent mobile phone networks standing up at an analyst meeting, because we used to go to a lot of analyst meetings, because everybody was very wealthy, not me, and say about phones, some ladies only take them out once a week, so they don't make a lot of calls. Yeah? They weren't even important enough a market to care for. There were a few businesses that thought differently, and Orange was one of them. And what we said was, that's nonsense. If we can put the ability to communicate with anybody else on the planet in the hands of everybody else, the world would be a better place. And we really believe that. In fact, we got Ridley Scott to direct videos for us called A Better Place, and showed us this techno-utopia of families and businessmen wonderfully happy in their business lives because of technology. Now, I think we've gone a long way to the first part of that vision. I think very soon, everybody on the planet will have the ability to communicate with everybody else on the planet. They may not want to, but they'll have the ability to. But I'm not sure we've done very much with that second part, and therefore the world will be a better place. At least I think we can do better at the world being a better place. So I ask why. Why is that? And it's kind of insightful to look at a different type of technology that we're all used to as well. So television. We've all got televisions. I would guess most of you have at least watched a television at some time in your life. I'm sure you've got lots of televisions in your houses. Coronation Street's been around for 75 years. We ought to be really used to televisions by now. Nothing should surprise us. Yet Steven Spielberg can put a fake white plastic shark on the screen and scare the heebie-jeebies out of us. Yeah? You see people all the time watching a horror film and they'll hide behind a cushion or chuck their red wine over the partner or jump behind the sofa. They'll get scared for no rational reason. Well, there is a rational reason, of course. Is that for the 6 million years of hominid development, if you like, human being development, and latterly the last 200,000 years of modern-day humans, us, Homo sapiens, if a shark was swimming towards us, it really was swimming towards us. If a tiger was running towards us, it really was running towards us. And so we did something about it. Not hid behind a cushion, presumably, did something else. But we haven't got used to the technology. Now, if we haven't got used to that technology, and it's been around for 90-odd years now, we haven't got a hope in hell of getting used to this technology. 10th year of the iPhone 3's anniversary last year, so we've had 10 years of mass market, if you like, smartphones. Then we can't get used to that in 10 years. The good news is maybe we can. but we just haven't yet. Internet began in the 50s. Small group of scientists plugged a bunch of computers together. Incidentally, for the first 5 years of the internet, it was 5 kilobytes big. 5 kilobytes. That's about the size of half a second of MP3 audio. Yeah, the whole internet. It's about as much heavy metal music as I can stand as well. But, so yeah, half a second of MP3 audio. And those scientists were using it to solve problems of nuclear fission, predict the trajectory of planets in the solar system, analyze the human condition. 5 kilobytes for the first 5 years. So next time you moan that your 64 gigabyte smartphone isn't big enough anymore, just think about what they were doing with it back then. So that was the 50s. Late 60s, I came about. I was born. 70s was the kind of influx of the standalone computer in business and at home, so individual data processing. 80s, we started plugging those together, and we called them local area networks, LANs. Then we started connecting the LANs to each other, and we called that a WAN, wide area network. Then in the 90s, Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, which is the bit of the internet that most of us recognize now, the World Wide Web. Then the smartphone arrived in the noughties, and we entered what I call the age of interruption. I'll come back to that in a second. We're now entering an age of the Internet of Things, where physical stuff's even more connected and talking to each other, and what you might call the age of the human gadget, where the last barrier between us and technology, the skin barrier, is being broken, for good reason. I'll come back to that at the end as well. So what's that led to? What is this age of interruption that's crept up on us? Well, the average smartphone user touches their smartphone 2,700 times a day. Most of you, because you've shown up for this, are probably higher than average smartphone users. So you're probably more like 3,000, 3,500 times a day, in 150 different sessions. Now just think about that for a second, because it really adds up, doesn't it? 150 times a day, you're interacting with your device, on average. If you think that sounds a lot, you're awake roughly 10 hours, 15 times an hour. Starts to feel like, okay, maybe we're right. Why is that important? I think none of us would argue that the world's got easier, more simple, that problems are easier to solve, that we're communicating much better, and we're a lot happier. Those things, complex problems, take focus to solve. Now, the problem is we're being interrupted 150 times a day. Research out of the University of California, which is in the book, suggests that if you're in what's called deep work, so shallow work is doing your expenses, tidying up the paperwork, bit of filing. Deep work is computer programming, writing a book. Writing a book's deep work. Creating a story, which is hopefully mildly interesting for people, is deep work. Creating a new strategy for Orange is deep work. New products and services, analyzing big data, all of these things are deep work. The research shows that if you're in that, and you're in this state of flow that Patrick mentioned, it can take up to 20 minutes for you to get back into that state once you've been interrupted. So you've got lots of complex problems which you need to focus on, and you're being interrupted 150 times a day. That surely can't go on. It's actually, research shows, it's like knocking 15 points off your IQ. Being interrupted constantly by these throughout the day is making you 15 points more stupid. It's like losing a night's sleep. You know what it feels like to lose a night's sleep and then have to work the next day. When you say to people, how are you feeling? They're a bit tired. So, how did you sleep last night? Oh, I slept fine. I don't know what's wrong with me. That happens quite a lot. And it's probably because of these. Other research, and I'm not sure how well it's supported, suggests that actually the part of our brain that deals with emotional intelligence is being physically damaged by interruption. So how we actually interrelate with each other. So technology is not bad by any means. We've had some wonderful benefits from technology. I think we're probably, currently, too busy with it to get anything done. And we think that if we don't challenge that right now, when we don't start talking about it, then it'll get a lot worse. And the reason it'll get a lot worse is because we're breaking through this skin barrier. One last little thought for you before I leave the floor. Take a look around. You've had a look at your neighbour. Take a look around at all the lovely people here. The meeting rooms, the screen, the fantastic event facilities, which, by the way, are extremely reasonably priced, and you can book those anytime you like. See me afterwards, or any one of my glorious team here. And just take a look around. So that image that you've got, your mind's processed that in about 13 milliseconds. And your brain's kicking around thoughts at the moment about as fast as the fastest Ethernet we've got at the moment. The only thing stopping your thoughts getting to the other side of the planet at light speed are these, your fingers. Really, really slow input-output devices. No matter how fast, I don't care how fast you type. You can't keep up with 13 milliseconds and Ethernet speeds. Advances in medical technology, for all the right reasons, and long may they continue, are plugging us gradually into the network. Now, you think you're being interrupted a lot at the moment. Imagine when your thoughts can travel to the other side of the planet at the speed of light, so can everybody else's getting to yours as well. So I think we have to do something. We at least have to have the conversation about it now, and just not let this keep happening, and somebody, some random algorithm, keep triggering those dopamine releases without us thinking about them. So that's the technology bit. There's lots more in the book. I'll hand you over now to some other people who's going to talk lots more about the leadership side of it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cliff. That's certainly set the scene to describe the problem. We're all overloaded with the technology. We don't know quite how to cope with it. So when we got to write the book, we said, fine, there must be some solution somewhere. One of the key themes through the book is pointing the finger at leaders. They're creating an environment that is making this happen in organizations. So certainly the stress associated with technology at work is firmly a leadership problem. So I'm pleased now to invite Matthias, who's come all the way from Zurich just to talk to you, to talk about leadership.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So I'm a little bit behind schedule, or heavily behind schedule, so I had to leave a minute ago to catch the train and the aircraft, because the aircraft is not behind schedule, unfortunately. So I have to keep it extremely short now, to 2-3 minutes, giving you what we have discussed at our university in Zurich on leadership. So we are doing research on this subject in about 5 years, looking at what does it take to create leadership in a digital, agile world with different structures. So we had looked at new companies like Freitag, so they're doing these bags from old truck tarps. We looked at IT companies. We looked at companies with democratic leadership structures, so where the people elect their leaders in a democratic voting. So we had looked at all these kind of things. How can we overcome the traditional hierarchies in terms of freeing up the organization to be able to cope with the demand in the digital world? And that we found out that conquering the digital overload has something to do with releasing people from the burden of the old hierarchy thinking. And this is difficult, more difficult than we thought, but we looked at very different organizations. And once, a couple of years ago already, in the Future of Work Forum, where I was already a member in 2006, we did a research, and one of the students in Estonia put it in one sentence, coincidentally. He said, "Why would I ask somebody with a job title if I could ask somebody with the answer?" So that was not meant funny. So he said, why do I have to wait for somebody in the hierarchy to allow me to do something? I just go ahead and do it. So because I'm looking for the answer, not for advice from a boss. So this is actually what we found in these new companies, Semco in Brazil, companies with democratic leadership, as I said, in Switzerland and Germany. And finally, we found also a very interesting piece of research in Google. Google has done a project last year called Aristotle. And in this project, they wanted to figure out what the difference is between high-performing teams and not so high-performing teams within Google. Also in Google, they don't have not everybody is high-performing, so they have lower-performing teams. And they looked at all the individual strengths. They said, okay, maybe it's a matter of the individual strength and capacities and competencies of the people. It was important, but not the decisive factor. They looked at experience. No. They looked at the amount of female members of the team. No. Other diversity aspects. A lot of things which we set as a hypothesis could be the reason for the performance, difference in performance. What they came up with as the number one factor was psychological safety. So people have to feel accepted, trusted, accepted as a person, as a human being. So actually, to sum it up, we figure out it's not the individuals, it's about the group. So we have to look into how can we change the attitude, the performance, the working together, psychological safety in teams. And then we met Patrick. So I met him in Hamburg. Since then, we are friends. And he told us about things which you just experienced a couple of minutes ago with this Connect exercise. And we further developed it. We were honored to having the opportunity to work with him on this project. And we're still working on it. And in my chapter of the book, I'll talk about generational issues from Sunny Grunewald, who wrote the chapter together with me. She is Generation Z. My perspective on these leadership issues, new structures, new agile working structures. And then the third part of the chapter is introducing Patrick and his idea about beyond leadership. So thank you for this, for listening. So I hope you enjoy the book.
Thank you very much, Matthias. There's a hand gone up here. It has to be very quick because they do have a flight to catch.
The only way. Psychology means I'm accepted. It can be much less than typical love. It could be I'm accepted in the group. They know I'm competent. They accept me as I am. So I don't have to play a role or something. That's psychological safety.
I think another round of applause to our two friends from Zurich. Unfortunately, have to go. So we said we'd bring you speakers from around the world. Well, we couldn't fly them all in because our next speaker, as you'll hear in a minute, is somebody who works. Ben has worked in 40 different countries in his career and is right now working abroad as well. So we've got him on video instead. This topic, he and I wrote a chapter about organization culture, because in the end, how does the leadership get translated into the way people work? It's through something quite nebulous that we call culture. And Ben talks a little bit about that. So we have him on video. Well, I think he has a round of applause from you, even though he won't hear it. The event is actually being recorded on video, so he will probably get to see the applause at some stage in the future. It is also, incidentally, being streamed out live, so if you don't want to be seen live, or if you're not supposed to be here, then don't turn around and wave at the cameras. So, back to real speakers again, and pleased to say that not only have we got speakers from Europe, but we have one all the way from the west coast of the USA. Susan Stuckey was one of two of the speakers, the contributors to the book, and along with Jim Ware, they contributed a couple of chapters, particularly again looking at their experience of dealing with senior leaders in organizations. And in this particular case, Susan's going to help us think through the kind of mindset that leaders now need in this world of digital overload. Susan.
Thank you very much. Hi. Everybody still here with us? Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so this is, I'm going to start with a question. And the question is, what do conquering digital overload and returning polluted rivers to something more like the way they were before have in common? Okay, so if you have the answer, go ahead. What I wanted to say was that grappling with a digital overload. So I took our assignment at face value. I said, digital overload, oh, let's go. What are we going to do about it, right? It isn't the kind of problem to solve. Neither is a polluted river. You don't solve a polluted river, right? Remember when polluted rivers rivers in the U.S. used to catch fire? I don't know if the canals ever caught fire here, but in the U.S., the Cuyahoga in Cleveland, Ohio, caught fire. And in 1969, Time magazine, which was then a venerable weekly, which isn't really venerable anymore, or a weekly, featured the burning river on its cover, okay? Who, except budding environmentalists and the people living nearby, even knew the Cuyahoga River was catching fire, right? It wasn't until 2009, nearly 40 years later, that the riverfront was reopened to swimmers and fishermen. At the time, it was noted by Mr. Perricone that the cleanup didn't happen because a bunch of wild-haired hippies protested on the street. This happened because, he said, a lot of citizens up and down the watershed worked hard for 40 years to improve the river. It wasn't until 2009, the fish and birds had returned by 2009, and it looks like a river again. And people are fishing again, although they're reportedly not eating the fish more than once every 2 weeks or so. It's not perfect yet. As of 2017, last year, nearly 50 years later, farm runoff hasn't been entirely curtailed, and kayakers are in danger of being hit by container ships. So all is not right, but it's amazing what they've managed to do. But it took 40 years, and it took a lot of leadership and a lot of people. There are lots of reasons why rivers get polluted. Of course, there are many different players in making it so. Cities, industry, environmental groups, regulatory agencies, scientific bodies, farming. There were a lot of chemicals. There was a lot of mud, a lot of really dirty mud that had to get cleaned up. Now, conquering digital overload will be a similar sort of thing, I'm claiming. There are a lot of reasons for it, and many different players involved. Here, too, there are inventors and the purveyors of technology, including the technology bullies, and you know who I mean. Users, that includes you, me, our friends, our families, the people we work with. It includes all of us. Scientific bodies, IT functions, regulatory agencies, marketers, governmental agencies, innovators, and soon technology itself. Automated vehicles, for instance, robots. How about, all the robots that do the work that we used to do? Or about Aibo, the Sony dog robot. Or he's cute, isn't he? Or maybe it should be, it's cute. We haven't even figured that out. So what do digital overload and polluted rivers have in common? Conquering them will mean engaging a lot of players, and that is going to take abundant leadership, okay? But not just any leadership. I think it's going to take what's been alluded to here earlier by several of the speakers. It's going to take shared leadership, collaborative leadership, cooperative leadership across a whole many different variety of institutions. And I know this is going to be hard because I remember when I stumbled over it the first time, which is I managed to get the heads of IT, facilities, and HR in the same room back at Hewlett-Packard in the 90s, in the early 90s. We'd gotten them together to listen to the result of some work we'd done inside the company, and we hoped to have them act jointly on the outcome of the work we had done. They listened in rapt attention. Well, maybe not rapt attention. But as I stood there listening to what the executive asked and what they thought about, I thought, oh my God, now what? They don't have any idea what it would mean for us to take this challenge on together, and I didn't either. Now, as we've heard today, it wasn't, there are many models for shared leaders. There are all kinds of tools out there. So I'm not even going to talk about the leadership and the kinds of tools and everything else. I want to talk about, and there are a lot of people around here who know a lot more than I do. I want to talk about one thing that I think leaders will have to do, and that is to be able to lead mindset shifts. Have to lead their organizations through thinking about things in a different way. Okay, so I'm thinking that one thing I want to point out about mindset shift is that they're scale agnostic. And by that I mean, you have the whole flat world, round world thing. Remember that? And you really get it, people had to go through a serious, and it was a societal thing, it was a cultural thing. And then there's smaller ones, like, red wine, well, it starts out that it's good for you, then it's not bad for you, then it's bad for you, and then it's good for you again. I mean, it goes back and forth. These are all mindsets that society and cultures go through adapting themselves to one way or another. I want to point out that mindsets like that are socially constructed. They're built and maintained by social kinds of organization and by social dynamics. It's not individuals alone. Try to put a mind shift out there all by yourself, and it's not going to work, right? It's got to be bought into. It's got to be constructed together, and we have to change it. Now, that doesn't mean, one time I said this in a group, and they said, but what about truth, and what about falsity? And a thing I want to say is, just because they're socially constructed doesn't mean they aren't valid and they aren't true. But it also doesn't mean they aren't false. They are false. Okay, they could be false. The point is, it's the very same social dynamics that create the true story as the false story. All right? And the mindsets. So that's why it's going to be really tricky, really, really tricky to be able to pull this off, and why you see the crazy things you see in various countries in the world, which I won't name. So another thing that's kind of, that's not disappointing, I think it's illustrative of what we're going to have to get in front of, is some recent research that's come out of rethinking truth and falsity in the light of all the complexity over the last few years. And there's just in a recent issue of the New Yorker, there's an article, a book review called Why Facts Don't Change Our Minds. Okay? We've been relying on facts, we've been relying on reason to change people's minds. And there's some very good critiques now out about why that's not working. And it said one of the arguments is the vaunted human capacity for reason may have more to do with winning arguments than with thinking straight. Another book is The Knowledge Illusion, Why We Never Think Alone. So I think there's a lot we can now learn about what it's going to take to actually get to recover some sense of reason and everything else. So shifting mindsets is going to be one of the key things that leaders have to do in this new world. My co-author, Jim Ware, and I came up with 3 mindset shifts we're going to just throw out as possible things that you might take into account as you're grappling with digital overload in your own organizations. The first one is a shift to outcome-based thinking. And you've probably heard all this. We give lip service to that a lot in different companies. But the industrial age left us with a whole set of practices that rely on inputs and outputs. Even the GDP, right, relies on inputs and outputs for its measurement of our economy. But with something like digital overload, we ought to be more concerned about what the outcome should be for society. What is it that we want? What does it look like? Here's an outcome-based idea that's different in a different world. Recently, the American Association of Computing Machinery, in a tech news email, pointed to a new algorithm developed by researchers at the Nanyang Technical University in Singapore. The problem that they were addressing, the situation they were addressing, was that traffic was horrible. It's often horrible everywhere. But what they figured out was it was getting hung up at the intersections. Now, in the past, a solution-based approach, a problem-solution-based approach would have been, and they would have done this, to either write another traffic calming algorithm, or in the not too distant past to redesign the roads and intersections, which of course for financial reasons is now out of the question. Instead, the technologists came to a different approach. They defined an outcome. They wanted to maximize the probability that none of the network links, aka road intersections, would encounter a breakdown. That's a mindset shift, and you go about solving that in a very different way. But getting that algorithm in place, they came up with an algorithm, and getting that one in place is going to take a lot of leadership. And I didn't have the time, didn't have the time to go actually find out if it's ever been implemented, which I mean to do. But I just want to point out that once you have that clever thing, getting it actually used is going to be something else together. But I think one of the things that I want to suggest for each of our three mind shifts is something, you know, what a grappling hook is. A grappling hook is something that pirates used to use to board ships. And has 4 claws like this. They're still around, okay? And I want to give you a grappling hook for getting debris out of your thinking, if you will, as a metaphor. And I think that for outcome-based thinking, and here you might consult your very own, you know, people here in innovation. Design thinking is a great place to start. Okay, if you want to get people to think about an outcome, that's a good discipline. Mindset shift number 2. I think in the workplace, it's time to shift to something I'm calling work-centric thinking. Okay, so for some time I'm not going to bore you with lots of stories, although I could. Focused on work, just plain old work, okay? Paid work, unpaid work, housekeeping, business strategies, writing reports, filling in forms, you name it. I've been working with teams of, among other things, ethnographers to make the work that gets done visible to a design team, whether it's for facilities or technology or policy or organizational design or any of these different things. So, the second mind shift is to shift to focus on work-centric approaches. Now, I see this coming anyway, even if they're not called that, because it's triggered in part by the explosion of options in how to get work done. Think about it, step back. Think about how the options to get work done. There's who, right? Freelancing, crowdsourcing. There's all kinds of different payment mechanisms. There are auctions, there are contests, there are this and that and the other thing. There is a wide array in the choice of who's available or eligible to do the work, and events and where it can be done. I worked for IBM for about 10 years and worked on this with them in terms of a work marketplace. And if you think about it, how do we make those decisions now? Well, they're partly policy. They're partly our practices and ways of doing it. But if you have something that you're trying to get done, you have a zillion ways of getting it done. We don't have any really principled ways of thinking about it. So we spend a lot of time trying to manage jobs, talent, the workplace, the workforce, everything but the work. So the digital transformations that we see is actually changing the nature of the work that we're doing, right? What it is that we're doing. And one of the really scary things is this sort of what I call the race to the bottom, which is to the commodification of task work. Okay, and driving everything down to the smallest level, and then you have to put it back together again. At IBM, we interviewed a bunch of people who were required to use a work marketplace like Mechanical Turk to get programming done. And I interviewed them, and they said, well, you know what? I would have given it to my team. I wouldn't have had to tell them what to do. They would just know. I put my request out for a report to get made and to be shipped out, emailed out to a team. Nobody signed up for it. I only got people who signed up for one or the other of those tasks. She had to put it all back together on the back end herself. Never talk about what has to happen when you have to pull it all together on the back end. I think what I'm afraid about is that our view of what it takes to get work done is so impoverished, is so naive, that in the end, what I worry about is that we will automate as much as we can automate, and then there will be all this other work left over, and nobody's going to pay for it. So, grappling hook here to think about work marketplaces. Focus on the work. What are you trying to, why have we lost the basics? What are we trying to do here, and why are we trying to do it? And who are we going to do it with, and how are we going to get it done? And, you know, all this business of, you know, managing talent and everything else, if you put up a marketplace, no, I'm not a capitalist, but I do think it works, where the people who have work that they need to get done and the people who want and can do the work can find each other. Okay? There's a lot going on in that world. The last one, which I'll be brief, is that we've had a sort of funny relationship with respect to work and people from the beginning of the digital world, the computer world, and we have automation, which we're really familiar with. There was also, at the same time, a competing idea of augmentation, augmenting the work that we did. And the person gets associated with this was a man by the name of Douglas Engelbart, who invented the computer mouse back in the 60s. And he invented a whole lot of other things. So, all right, I'm getting a time signal here. So I just want to I want you to think about the following possibility, that actually what we want is to be able to collaborate with our digital technology in order to get work done. And you can see bits and pieces of this coming now. So IBM invented Watson, the computer, and then they went into sort of doctors and diagnosis. They wanted to automate diagnosis, okay? They were in that business for like years until they realized it wasn't going to work. That what they needed to do was find a way for doctors to work with Watson, okay, to learn from Watson, for Watson to learn from the doctor about how to come up with these diagnoses. And it's a very different interaction. It's a very different kind of interface design. You got a whole new field of interface design to go in here. Anyway, so conversational metaphors, those kinds of things, I think we're starting to see them. Chatbots, for instance, are a really good example of that. So that's my last grappling hook for the third challenge, which is tools that bring conversational interfaces to our interaction with digital technology. That is one place that I think we should be heading with all the energy we have. If we want to take control back of technologies we don't understand, I think we have to get involved with them, right? And we don't have to know how they work so much as we have to be able to work with them. And that's going to be different kind of work and different kind of technology and different kind of interfaces. And that's it.
Thank you. I now have the unenviable task of trying to summarize what you've heard and then introduce the panel. Some key messages coming out for me from all of the speakers around the amount of change that is happening, and it's happened so fast that we're really struggling to keep up. And you stop and think about it, you know, we're talking here about smartphones. The smartphones haven't actually been around that long. And certainly you look at work processes in organizations, we're still doing things essentially the way we used to do them. Well, when we invented the current form of work 200 years ago in the Industrial Revolution. What we've tended to do is to layer the technology just on top of what we were doing anyway. So people still have a diary full of meetings during the day, and then they have an inbox full of emails which they have to deal with in the evening because they now don't have the time to deal with it. I mean, let's have a little audience survey here. How many people suffer from too many meetings in the way they work? So vigorous hands going up at the back there. That's good. And how many people suffer from email overload in terms of too many emails in their inbox? Some of the similar people, funnily enough. And what we haven't done is stepped back and taken a new look at work and said, how do we get things done? Susan talked about finding different ways of achieving objectives, getting leaders to stop and think about, not about employing people, not about creating jobs. That's the kind of old way of getting things done. What we look at in the book is saying, in order to have people doing more satisfying things to achieve a result, they need the freedom to be able to do it. I like the analogy of the traffic lights. If you think about the way you behave at a traffic light, you do what you're told. Because there's a red light, you stop, there's a green light, you go. A lot of traffic engineers are looking at it and saying, hang on, why don't we just put a roundabout in? Roundabout then takes the responsibility away from the algorithm and the person who programmed the lights and gives it back to the motorist. They now choose when to go. And guess what? The traffic flows quite smoothly because they're making individual decisions. And we seem to have lost that somewhere in the way we're managing people. And the technology often is the catalyst that makes us think in systems, think in processes, and impose stuff on people. Now this is one of the things we thought about in the book. This is not rocket science. This is what all the management gurus have said for the last 50 years. What you do is you empower people, you give them responsibility, you allow them to choose when and where they work. And then they don't act like kids and run off and go and watch television all day, supposedly working from home. Actually, if you're measuring them by results, and one of the key things for the leaders is saying, actually what you need to do is look at what you're trying to achieve with your workforce, and leave them to decide, like responsible adults, when and where they get the job done, how they do the work. But that's a real challenge for many leaders, because somehow they still are living in the command and control role. So in the chapters looking at the culture, and something that Ben talked about a bit, is looking at cultures of trust. Saying, actually, in this new world, what we have to do is to trust people and give them freedom. Otherwise, what's happened? What's happening right now? People are quitting organizations because they don't have enough freedom. They're stressed out because of the overload from technology anyway. They kind of feel obliged to reply to those emails from the boss at weekend, even though the boss said, no, you don't really need to. But because their colleagues do, they think they're better. So there's this sometimes a bit self-imposed stress, but nevertheless, eventually they get to the stage of saying, hang on, I want to see the kids sometime. I want to have a life other than being controlled by the technology. Now we all know all these devices actually have an off switch. And one of the tests we think about is, whose finger is on that off switch? Is it the individual employee or is it their boss? Virtually has the picture. So who's controlling that technology? And one of the things we need to think about is, maybe if we just allow people to take control and decide for themselves how they work, when and where they work, that just reduces their stress significantly. But what that involves is, of course, a change of attitude from leaders, from managers, who now recognize that their role is not to tell people what to do. It's not the traditional top-down hierarchical command and control system. It is actually their role to empower, engage people. We talk about engagement all the time, and you look at what actually happens in practice. A lot of leaders struggle with this because it's something that doesn't come naturally. They didn't get where they are today by allowing people to get on and work the way they want to. They got where they are today by doing what their predecessor did, and that was telling people what to do and firing them if they didn't do it. So we've still got leftover cultures that are very inconsistent in a world where the technology should allow us all to take responsibility. This technology was bringing us good work-life balance, wasn't it? Because you could now go home to do the work. And as Ben mentioned, actually what we've ended up with is, instead of having traditional presenteeism, where you have to be in the office before your boss and make sure your car's still in the car park when he or she leaves at the end of the day, because that's good, you're there. We've now replaced that with virtual presenteeism. So now you may not be in the office, but you're still expected to respond 24/7 to the emails that you get. So all we've done is taken presenteeism and turned it into something that is now even more stressful and even more extending into the personal life. So the intention of the technology in some ways was to improve the balance in people's lives. They could choose when to work. Instead, it's actually invaded people in their homes to some extent and kind of forcing them to work when maybe they don't want to. So it's a question of shift of power back to the individual, and that's the challenge in these cultures. And the other thing that's obviously coming, Susan referred to this a bit, is a world where people do have much more choice. The gig economy, we keep calling it, where work can be done much more by individuals, and where the technology connects the user. Uber's a lovely example. With the person who needs, in that case, to get from A to B, and somebody who has a car who can provide them with something. So there's an app. In fact, you stop and think about it, maybe what we're talking about is replacing a lot of traditional organizations, structures, processes, management with apps. If it's as simple as connecting A to B and getting rid of a load of that bureaucracy in the middle, then we're going to be able to do that, and it will improve the efficiency of organizations. The problem is this is quite threatening to people in the hierarchy, people in the power structure, leaders and managers. Sometimes it's a brave leader that faces up to this. So something we look at again in the book, saying, if you want to continue to be successful as a leader, you've got to step back and look at how the culture needs to change and how the technology has to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Turning the servers off in order to help relieve the email stress does nothing but simply mean that when I come back in the morning, I've got extra emails to deal with because the server wasn't on when I wanted to deal with them in the middle of the night. And I happen to like dealing with them in the middle of the night. That's my choice, so why shouldn't I? You've just taken away a freedom because you think that's better for me. So actually, that's even worse than leaving the things on and then responsibly managing email as an example. So those are my thoughts triggered by what we've heard today. What I now want to do is to get a panel of people up here so you can get your thoughts out. Questions, comments are all very welcome. So just one round of applause for everybody who's spoken so far while we get the speakers up on the panel. Just while we're getting ready, let me just quote from an excellent book I can thoroughly recommend, which is available for a bargain £20 on the way out. In thinking about how big is this problem, obviously we did a lot of research. There's a whole set of references in the book, obviously, to all sorts of interesting reports. It's one I picked out here from the World Health Organization, who called stress the health epidemic of the 21st century. And they'd recently stated that depression is the leading cause of ill health and disability worldwide. And even more worryingly, they predict that by 2030, there will be more people affected by depression than any other health problem. And again, almost 40% of employees believe it's actually impossible to maintain a fast-growing career and a sound family life. So much for work-life balance. A significant number of people saying you have to sacrifice family life in order to have a successful career. This is in the 21st century, okay? And some of this is thanks to something that's called the work martyr effect. And there's a lot of research done into work martyr as well. People feel they have to be martyrs because somehow that's how they succeed in the conventional organization. Hopefully, this book will help to change some of that. Our panel, you have already met Cliff and Susan. This is Alain Ho. Alain is another one of the many future work forum consultants and has come to us today from, well, actually yesterday to be exact, from Geneva. So we have a good Swiss.
You cannot go back to the same day. You know.
Yes. So we have yet more international opinions. So let's get to some questions or comments from the floor. There's a microphone here if you'd like to speak in the microphone. If you'd like to give your name and organization, if you have one, when you ask the question, that would be great. Thank you very much. I think for the purpose of the recording, it's useful. Thanks.
Okay. Derek McCarthy, Taco Fit. I run a small company fitting tachographs to commercial vehicles, and then we do MOTs, engine management, this type of thing. Now, I've been listening to what you've all said up there about culture and people stressing. Now, I'm wondering whether to ban mobile phones, because halfway through, especially if they're taking figures down and everything, there are mistakes at times. Now, I've mentioned in the past, well, why didn't you leave mobile phones in the office? our people phone us and no one booked stuff in, but you're halfway through another job. Now, do I make a decision and say, that's it, finished? Mobile phones in the office till you go home? Or do I let them carry on like that? I don't know.
Anybody want to take that question? It's a vaguely technology related, Cliff.
I don't think sort of banning anything to do with technology is probably the answer. I sort of reflect back on my point, and my part of the book's quite philosophical in terms of technology, which is kind of, as you probably gathered from our talking, so I probably can't give you a direct answer to that. But it's not a technology problem. We don't think. It's a leadership problem and a cultural problem. And, you know, people responding to whether it's external things or work-based things that distract them from feeling valued, being creative, being the most productive you could want them to be, and keep coming back to work every day, is more of a leadership issue than it's a technology issue. The thing that technology has done, I think, we believe, is exacerbated that problem. It's highlighted it, it's brought it to the fore, rather than technology per se being the problem. That'd be my take on it anyway.
Yeah, I think that, I concur to what you just said. You all know the company Deloitte, and they have a very important human resources department or consultancy. They have for, many years published a list of why do people come to work, what do they want when they come to work. The first three, for 11 years in a row, have been a meaningful job. Okay, there are different things. The next one, it's kind of interesting because, of course, now we talk about psychological safety, but it is respect, okay? And further studies have come, from there, and that's the idea. And one of the biggest problems which is happening today is that generally organizations are hierarchical, okay? And the people at the top of the hierarchy are people who have been told what we were saying, red light, you stop, green light, you go, okay? That's not the same thing, with the people who are entering into the labor market, nowadays, and they have to report to the red light, green light, kind of people, because the hierarchy is based on experience. And that's one of those aspects, which is a problem. And on top of it, there is this thing, on top of it, it doesn't know what I can do, with technology and things like that. And I think that was one of those things which is very, very important, is that leadership is also, it was mentioned in 2 or 3 presentations, they have to learn. The leadership is to learn what can be done, with digital. And finally, I would say, there is another psychologist who finally said, you like it or not, but you have 10 or 15 people, 15% of people who are just lazy and don't want to work. And that's one of the things, that we have. Of course, we concentrate on the 85 or 90%, which, can work. But there are some people, you do whatever you want, you will never be able, to get them motivated to come to work or to do, a good job. But let's work on the 90%, and on the 90%, a meaningful job, a job with a purpose, and a job with autonomy and respect.
Your comment about maybe taking the technology off people reminds me of a couple of instances we've come across where companies decide to ban their employees from using the company's network to do their shopping, book their holidays, renew their insurance or whatever. Unfortunately, unless they take the smartphones off people as they come through the door, then they're just doing it under the desk instead of on top of the desk, and looking busy when the boss comes past. So they will find creative ways around it anyway. So I wouldn't think that just by removing technology. I've only been one place which was a very secure MOD center where they did take phones off everybody for obvious reasons. But I don't, unless you've got a very good reason, I think you need to think of alternative ways of coping with the issue rather than trying to, again, it's a question of dealing with the problem rather than just trying to deal with the symptom. Back to turning the email servers off doesn't do anything except cause more stress, for example. Another question or comment? Yes. Front, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jagdeep Boran, CEO of My People Biz, which is a recruitment platform. I'll try not to mess this question up. Is there not a fundamental conflict between shareholder capitalism and letting people work as much or as little as they want to do, given the competitive nature of the economy? I mean, I can understand in some more the creative engineering side of things, when you're coding, there's a zone, but when it comes to something like a function like sales, your success is how many contacts did you make, how many people did you get through the funnel, and that's going to affect a bottom line. Is there not a fundamental conflict there?
Susan,
Yes.
would you like to take that one?
Yes. I think that is, well, you're seeing a pushback on that, finally. Starting to see a serious pushback on
Because
shareholder capitalism.
I mean, the guy who's in the office all the time is the one who gets the promotion.
Yeah.
So until,
Yeah. I mean, we can't quite wait for that. I think there's a look. I think if you want people to have meaningful work, they're going to have meaningful work. They'll do it, but they're just going to leave. They're going to not do important things. They're going to leave things undone. They're not going to be productive employees, and you will never know because you're not looking at the right things.
does that mean as a society we have to legislate this kind of thing? Like in Germany, I think Volkswagen have done it where, after a certain amount of time, the email servers stop passing emails. You can send them, but they don't get to the recipient.
Yeah.
They don't deliver on the weekend. So that social pressure of my boss has emailed me, so I better respond right now.
But that's a Band-Aid, I think. I mean, I do think this turning off of technology. I think the attitude that's behind that Germany has, and the way in which the unions are partners with the business in the way that they aren't any other place, and there's probably not perfect there either, is something that is more important than the actual mechanism that they pick.
And I would say, sort of from a sales perspective, so a lot of my day job sales as well, I just find, and it's not necessarily volume based, loads and loads and loads of leads cold calling. It's more considered sales, putting together quite not complex, but responses to complex RFPs and that kind of thing, creating proposals. Now, for my type of work, for that kind of sales, this constant interruption is no good. That's this form of deep work. How can I put together something that's creative, that matches our organizational capability, whatever this potential client wants, and put that across in an interesting, creative way? That kind of sales activity is really hard to do when you're being interrupted 150 times a day, just to make the extreme point. Now, there are probably other types of sales activity, which is volume, pick up the phone, do the same script. Technology's going to automate that away anyway. Therefore, I think it's still a problem. So,
Yeah, I think answering your question about is there a conflict between shareholder interest and new ways of working? I think the answer is absolutely no, because I think what's missing in that formula is the connection between the new ways of working and productivity. Okay? And if going back to measuring people by results, people get measured by results, they're likely to be more productive. At the moment, we tend to reward people for time. The person who stays in the office longest gets rewarded more. The person who gets the job done in 4 days a week actually is smarter than the person who takes 6 days a week. And who do we reward? We reward the one who stays longer. Yeah, so we've got a reward system that fundamentally encourages low productivity. Surprise, surprise, the UK in particular has a long hours culture and has low productivity compared with many of the other industrialized countries. Now, I'm not sure we want to go to the same extent as other countries like France, for example, where they have legislation that limits the number of working hours. But in a way, there's a message there, which is actually if you shorten somebody's hours or they're under more time pressure, they'll still get it done. And there's a phenomenon that we've noticed where you take, typically say it's a mother returning from maternity leave, who decides to try and do her old job. The boss, but she wants to have Fridays off. So she said, well, I'll try and do the job in 4 days a week. And a year later, sits down with the boss, and they say, how's it going? He said, well, actually, you're doing all right. You're managing to get the old job done. And she says, yeah, that's fine, but there's one problem. You're only paying me 4/5 of what you're paying my colleagues, and I'm smarter than them because I'm getting the job done in 4 days a week. It's taking them 5. What are we rewarding? You know? So we've got to stop and think about if we're actually rewarding the wrong thing, then that's a problem. And then back to the point about what shareholders are interested in ultimately is the bottom line. Although, interestingly, more and more of them are concerned now about social responsibility, how people are actually treated, diversity, all these other measures that are now starting to creep into companies as well. Ultimately, if the company fails financially,
I'm a bit skeptical about all the CSR and all the rest of it. You write your statement and then put it in your annual report and then forget about it and say, hey, look, we've got a policy, don't worry about it.
There's a lot of tokenism. Okay, can we have any panel want to add anything? Another question, yes, at the front here. Okay, we'll get to you, don't worry.
Yes, you obviously have a lot more experience than I do, and I would like to put in front of you a problem that I have, and I needed to reflect on it and tell me why it is happening and how we can change it. I've seen a couple of people in the panel and not in the panel that are exalting the importance of a team within the organization. And they seem to think that the team is going to be even more important in the future. But I have a problem with that. This is part, obviously, of the accepted culture of large organizations. However, what is the role of the individual within the organization? I mean, I can think of myself as an entrepreneur, and I can think of another 2 or 3 people in here that actually don't fit in large organizations, and there's a massive pushback. Effectively, they kick us out of the large organizations. We form our own companies in order to survive because there's no other way to survive. So I want to know why this is happening in large organizations, and bearing in mind that the entrepreneurs bring a new breeze of innovation and creativity into the organization, how can we change the culture in order to incorporate these people?
Brilliant question. There's probably a long answer from everybody. Anybody want to take it?
So I think so we meet a lot of entrepreneurs here. There's any one time on the campus there are 60 kind of 1 to 5 man businesses, all trying to grow their businesses with pre-revenue, very little capital, and all that kind of thing. I see a similar kind of facet, and I don't know if this goes some way to answer your question, but the same kind of, if you like, lack of focus or inability of focus or constant interruption almost happens even more so with individual entrepreneurs. And it's so key to focus when you're trying to build your business and grow your business. It's so key to focus and keep everything very simple. The minute you hop online and start, searching for, is this a good idea? Is that a good idea or not? You'll get 200,000 search results with a whole bunch of naysays saying it's awful, that's been tried before, this hasn't been tried before, I did this, I did that, why don't you do that, why don't you do this? And you'll end up with 50 different options. And that, for me, doesn't help your self-esteem. I think it started off with an esteem question at the start. That doesn't help that. What helps it is you believing in what you're doing and focusing and maintaining that kind of laser-like focus on a very, very simple direction. It may turn out to be wrong, but it's much better to do that than be confused by 20,000 different options online. So I see the same issues at individual level with entrepreneurs as you do in big corporates. As soon as you have an idea, you search for it, and suddenly you're almost paralyzed into inaction by the volumes of people saying, yes, it's a great idea, and yes, it's a bad idea.
I mean, I think we could spend a long time talking about the problems of innovation in large organizations versus small organizations, which are why I think there will continue to be startups, small businesses, somehow feeding into larger ones who can maybe take some of the ideas and capitalize on them. And I think incubation centers like this are a perfect example. Can we move on? Because there are quite a few other people at the back. I think you were next. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Jamie Kiddy from Wesleyan. I introduced innovation to him, which was interesting to say the least. So yeah, the question is, so you're saying at the moment we're analysing the next generation of customer. So we're looking at where they're going to be in the generation alpha and their children before them, so on and so forth. So you're saying like now, the older generation is stop-go, sort of the traffic light analogy. But when you're looking at the imprint of kids unlocking iPhones for the first time before they can actually communicate with a human being, they can find YouTube, raise Peppa Pig on it. They can't actually say, hi dad, or anything like that. So the first imprint on a human being is now a machine. It's the best babysitter in the world, right? But that machine's teaching the child input, process, output. Instant gratification, which is then an initial addiction, which we're all addicted to. Going back to the phone analogy, I need to touch it 150 times a minute, let alone a day. So if that is the next generation, the tolerance levels that they're dealing with now, so free thinking and free work, it won't be there. It's you either give me your attention, give me what I want from you, or I'm leaving, and I'll find it somewhere else, because the option, the technology is there. So in that sort of sense, do you disagree, do you agree? And I'm just trying to validate some of my own ideas. It should bring back into the corporate world to scare the crap out of them.
Yeah, okay, very quick comment. If what you're saying is children want to interact with something that they find satisfying,
yes.
then if we don't design work that way, people won't want to work in organizations. There's nothing stopping work design being done to mimic some of the pleasurable things. Gamification is something which Cliff could talk about for a long time in terms of designing work processes to mimic some of the things. Now you could argue this is creating addiction, but actually if people get pleasure out of doing games, why can't they get pleasure out of work?
It wasn't even games. I mean, if I ask you for something and you don't deliver it to me instantly, something else will. There will be another tool, there'll be another platform, there'll be something there that can do it for me. So, but we've noticed in our industry that people are starting to act more like machines. So they want that instant gratification. I want bullet points. I don't want to read a giant brief or a deck or anything else. Tell me it now, or I'll find someone else that will. And I can see it happening in the cycle again from the next generation coming through. It's like shopping and this, that, and the other. They want it instantly. The battle is there on the digital playing field. And it just worries me that you're saying IBM and Watson. I was there on Monday and just listening to their waffle. It's a great system, but the salesmen don't quite understand it yet. So, but it's interesting to see those decisions taken off us from AI. But you still want that instant gratification. So,
I don't know if you want to talk about kind of meaningful work versus instant work in terms of something.
Yeah. So I suppose a pessimistic view of the future is that pans out, and that's it's pessimistic or maybe I'm just naive, maybe I'm old, but this kind of pessimistic view of the future where that is how life is. Everything's instant gratification, and you never ever get any time to reflect or think about anything deeply because the answer's instantly there anyway. My kind of question is then, what's our role? What's the point? Is it almost certainly. Now, things could go that way. I don't think they will. It's that kind of technical dystopia that's been, talked about for donkey's years, the kind of HAL 2001 Space Odyssey type kind of thing. And I just don't think that's where it'll go. I don't know where it'll go, but I think it has a lot more to do with humans becoming much more creative and working together on really interesting, deep, meaningful stuff, kind of stuff that Patrick was sort of alluding to near the start with that very simple, quite powerful example. That kind of thing, more than, technology's given us all the answers to everything, therefore we don't need to bother anymore. At the end of the day, it's what you choose to believe.
Yeah, I just wanted that from a pragmatic point of view, and I have a human resources background, that's what we will have, those people. So we have to do something to get them working, otherwise nobody will work, because they are, generally speaking, of course, all the same. There is, basically, we know the first thing, there is no loyalty. So that's an interesting thing, there is no loyalty. Eventually, I have another view, because there is no loyalty also, because most of them are in split families, and there are all kinds of sociological, reasons. But okay, I take your point. But for whatever, there is no loyalty. People don't like hierarchy. Okay, that's one of the things that at school there was kind of a system where, you know, the teacher was basically, without question, the leader of the class. Now she is a facilitator, you know, one of the boys, one of the kids, you know. This is the kind of thing, and you know, these things are definitely creating problems, but we have to adapt, and it's not easy because that's a leadership problem. How do you do that? You train the people as much as you can to try to adapt to the new. I am talking about the supervision, you know, and the direction of the company, the management of the company. But we have, in my view, you know, we have no alternative. We have absolutely no alternative, and this is the kind of thing. You know, I teach in 5 different business schools. I can tell you that teaching in the first year bachelor is a challenge. You know, it is really a challenge. Okay, talking about the example which you know, was given, why should I ask my supervisor if I can go directly to Wikipedia or whatever, you know, to get the answer? That's the kind of thing. I find myself, you know, I have found, because now that's a few years, you know, myself in a situation where when I quote a figure, I see them going all, you know, on the computer to check if the figure that I have been quoting is correct, you know. And okay, most of the case it is. but you know, the fact of the matter is that we have to be ready. You know, our generation is to be ready to handle this kind of thing. And this is absolutely, in my view, and you know, in my view, that's one of the things. That's what we have. So with what we have to do, you know, whatever. And it is, you know, it's not necessarily with the digital, but that's also why I was saying, and some of the speakers have been saying, we, the management, you know, we, the older people, more senior, more mature people, we have to adapt, you know, to their use of the technology, because there they have an advantage, and if you are not at the same level, you are stupid.
Okay, we're running short of time, so we probably got time for 2 short questions. So tell you what, if we can take both questions and see if we maybe can answer them together. First one there.
Okay, Derek Southall, Head of Innovation and Digital at Gowling WLG and founder of Hyperscale Group. This is a question about technology evolution. I was reading some stuff by some futurists the other day, and there's a line that stopped me in the tracks where it said basically, if you form any vision of what the future is going to look like from anything you've ever seen or read or your imagination, virtually none of them are palatable, as in they're all worlds you wouldn't want to live in. A, do you agree? And if so, as theoretically the cleverest creatures on the planet, why have we got into that position?
Good question. We'll take the one here as well.
Michael de Groot, Staying Alive UK, freelance, whiteboard, animator and podcaster. By the way, this is a really great discussion and thank you for putting this on. I'm really enjoying it and my mind's overflowing with comments that I want to make. But just, are you aware of Frederick Laloux's work? Okay, and also Matthew Taylor, good work, the report he did? Because they all kind of blend into the research and the comments that you're all making. My question is, well, first of all, the comment, I believe psychological safety that our guest that had to go mentioned, the respect, the love, etc. Really, that's what everybody wants, you know, in organizations, and that's what the leaders don't give, number one. And then my question is, what is your outcome with this book?
Okay, what we'll do, I think it's just come along the panel, trying to answer both questions in a sense of, is there a positive view of the future or not? And do we cover that in the book, I guess, is it? Trying to paraphrase both questions, starting with Cliff and coming along.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Yeah, anything you see, most sci-fi films, most sci-fi programs generally don't have a happy ending. Anything to do with the future generally doesn't have a happy ending. And you can argue, I suppose, that it's that sells stories and sells books, hopefully ours is a bit more optimistic. You know, it sells. You know, I think technology, if we challenge it, so if we're doing kind of what we're doing here today, and we all keep challenging what's happening, and we don't just accept from the big half a dozen technology companies, and even lots of the entrepreneurs here, we don't just accept the technology that's coming in, and we ask questions like, okay, I can see how that makes my supply chain more effective, but how does it deal with digital stress as well? Or if we just ask the questions as leaders of the big software providers, start asking the questions, commercially they will start responding, I think. And that will hopefully create more of a utopian view than perhaps the kind of doomsday scenarios are. I do believe, because the death of humanity through technology has been predicted for decades, for donkey's years, and it hasn't happened. Hopefully we're not on the verge or the crux of that. I do think if we just ask these questions of leaders, which is kind of why we picked to invite you guys in the room today, because as far as I know, most of you are in these kinds of positions where you can actively question this of the software industries, the industries that I've worked in all my life. And we never got asked those questions. It was all about how can we get those bits of that car to that complete car as fast as possible in the cheapest way possible. And all of that kind of thinking, I think, has led to the point we are now. And now we need to introduce some questions about how can we do that and still increase the creativity, the happiness, the well-being of our people.
Well, I guess what I think, we're in charge of. We have to take responsibility for this. I mean, the technology doesn't do anything. We do things with technology, and people are designing the technology, and we can't afford to be not participating in the development of it and the use of it, and we've left it to IT for way too long, and technology companies way too long, right? So I think we just need to, I can't say anything stronger than ask questions. Think about how you think it's going to play out, and ask, well, is it going to play out that way or not, or what are you going to do about it so it doesn't turn out that way? But if we just go for the bottom line all the time, faster, cheaper, better, life is not going to be very pleasant, and it's not.
Yeah. No, let's say it's a matter.
We're in charge.
I said it already several times, so I confirm, because we have basically no choice, or that's our choice to try to do something. Just one point that personally I am worried about is that how you can teach, because you can handle loyalty one way or another, you can handle hierarchy by training. There is one thing that I am worried about, because I have personally not found the answer. How can we answer impatience? Because we have a generation of people who have immediate answers to everything. And therefore, in terms of a quote-unquote career, after 3 months, they want to change. After 1 year, they want to be the director of the company. So this is, okay, I am obviously exaggerating, but this is impatience. I do not know how in this, situation, and impatience is what is also creating stress, because we all, are submitted to this syndrome.
Okay. I'm going to end on a more positive note. Firstly, I think your scenario is saying people want instant gratification, instant answers. If it is an instant answer, it'll be given by AI. If I want a thought-through answer and I go to a human, then it's going to take time. Okay? If it's that simple, it'll get answered by technology. Now, what this scenario says then, that all the routine work gets, and we've kind of done this in manufacturing already with robots and so on, and we're starting to do it in the office and with knowledge work, but we've still got a long way to go. Okay? Say anything that can get sensibly covered by an algorithm, although it may be a very complex algorithm, gets done. What's left are for the things that are highly creative, use human talent that we still haven't yet, and probably won't for the next 20 or 30 years, manage to get technology to do for us in a satisfactory way. Okay? So there will be music and art not produced, although some can be, but not produced by computers or by artificial means. Whether there's enough work in the conventional sense still to go around is a kind of question, or how we reward that creativity is an interesting question as well. And coming back to the point about, does the financial system support this? People like Frederic Laloux promoting a kind of structure and organization which is very self-determining, okay, with relatively little control and management, and much more people working under their own initiative. And that's something which this scenario, this positive scenario can do. It says that there will be responsible work for people to do using their human skills with freedom to do it in a way that they want to do it. It's so self-motivation. So it's a roundabout and not a set of traffic lights. But then you look at the few organizations, some of which are in the Lou's book, which I thoroughly recommend, as well as our book, of course, that have managed this. They turn out to be, you look at Ricardo Semler in Brazil, you look at a lot of the ones, the Buurtzorg in Holland, and so on, they'll all get quoted, Morningstar in the US. They're all owned by a chief executive with a vision. The minute the company gets financial interference from whether it's shareholders, a venture capitalist or whatever, guess what? Conservatism comes in, and they say we want to see a hierarchy, we want to see a managing director, we want to see these things done conventionally. And I think until the people who control the purse strings wake up to the fact that there is a new world of working more effectively, then we will be held back, I think, in this progress towards a happier world where I think routine work will get done by technology and humans will be left to do the really interesting, motivational, engaging stuff. How much of that there will be around and exactly how we reward it still remains to be seen, but I'm positive about the future. And the book, I think, is also positive about the fact that we're going through a stage where it's only in the last decade, really, that we've had the ability to work in such a mobile way that people can use the technology, and that we've got this overload syndrome. It's come up on us pretty fast, okay? And we're still struggling to keep up with it in terms of the way we organize work, the way we manage, the way we lead. And so part of the message in the book is, leaders, stop and think about, are you still managing your organizations in ways that were invented 200 years ago? Wake up and see that technology is changing that, and stop and think again. If you don't, then there's a simple answer to what will happen to your organization. The best talent will leave because they will be stressed out, they want more responsibility, they want autonomy, and they will go and set up their own startup or however they want to do it, and the organization will suffer as a result. And as organizations rely more and more on creativity, innovation, human talent, because those are the only things left to differentiate, because everybody can use the AI, then the winners will be those that manage to harness the human talent in a way that is engaging, and the losers will be those that have still got the old industrial age management hierarchical structures. That's the note on which to end, because there's now some food and things here. So before I just hand over to Cliff, I'd like to say a word of thanks to the panel. I'd like to give them a round of applause. And before Cliff signs off, I'd just like to say on behalf of the Future Work Forum, a great thank you to Innovation Birmingham for being the hosts and for providing the support for this event. Thank you, Cliff.